Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Genevieve Piturro about her book, Purpose, Passion, and Pajamas, How to Transform Your Life, Embrace the Human Connection, and Lead with Meaning. Genevieve Piturro, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you. So nice to be here, John.
It is a pleasure to be with you today. You're joining us from outside of Manhattan. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be discussing the topic explored in your book, Purpose, Passion, and Pajamas, How to Transform Your Life, Embrace the Human Connection, and Lead with Meaning. I love that title. I love everything about the subtitle too. I think we definitely need purpose and passion in our life. We want to have meaning in what we do, whether that's at home, in our family life, at work, or whatever. And I think it's fun that you add in the pajamas piece, and I'm sure you'll tell us a little bit more about that here in just a minute. Before we get started, I wanted to share Genevieve's bio with everybody. Genevieve Piturro is all about purpose and the human connection. She was a successful television marketing executive until she dramatically changed the direction of her life. She found her true purpose when a sudden inner voice challenged her life as she knew it. In 2001, she founded the hugely successful national nonprofit Pajama program when a 6-year-old girl's question changed her life forever and she jumped off the corporate ladder. This year, the program celebrates its 21st anniversary, having delivered more than 7 million magical gifts of new pajamas and new books to children through their 63 chapters across the United States. What a tremendous background, what a tremendous nonprofit and cause. And I'm excited to talk about all this with your book as we explore that together today. Anything else you would like listeners to know by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in further?
No, that's more than enough. Thank you.
All right. So tell us a little bit just about your backstory then. I teased it in your bio, but how did you go about the process of shifting career trajectory, getting off that corporate ladder, starting a nonprofit, and focusing on something entirely different than what you were doing previously?
Well, I never planned to make any switch. I had a straight line in mind. I always wanted to be in corporate America. I wanted to be in the entertainment business. I wanted to be a single woman with, nothing to stop me from reaching as high as I could go. I wanted to be in a city. I worked in Manhattan. So all of those things was what my path was. My heart told me go there from a young age, when I was a teenager. And I thought that would be an exciting, full, fun life. And being the first of 4 born into a really traditional Italian family, my dad came from Italy off the boat. And I just didn't really follow in the footsteps that they'd hoped that I would, have a family, have children and grandchildren for them. And, yes, get an education, but get married and, the like. But I heard another drummer. And so there I was going off to Manhattan working in TV. And I was living that dream that I thought was full. And it was full of busyness. It was full of travel. It was full of going. It was full of making money for me, but making money for my bosses. And while it was what I thought I always wanted until 13 years in, and one quiet afternoon when I heard a voice, did I ever second guess myself? And I was sitting alone in my apartment, and I heard a voice ask me from in me, if this is the next 30 years of your life, is this enough? And John, when I heard that, all of a sudden, within seconds, I thought 30 years ahead, and I said, I'm going to be alone, more alone than now. My life is going to be empty, because all of a sudden I felt that excitement and that fun and, that energy in my job sort of dissolve into nothingness. That there was nothing left when I thought about all the stuff I was doing and stuff I had. And it didn't take me long to realize that family, which was very important to me growing up, and of course I loved my siblings and my parents, grandparents, my extended family, but I didn't have children. And I thought, how can I bring children into my life? And I knew that there was a hole there for children. And that's when I started to call the police and see where they take the children. I was reading about in the papers. We all read about and see on the news the children in our hometowns that are mistreated and worse. And they told me some of the emergency shelters, and I called and asked if I could come and read to the children at night after work, and they welcomed me in. And that started the whole ball rolling on finding where I was grounded, where I felt the most me, where I felt at home. If I wasn't going to be at my house I grew up in with my parents, sitting on a floor in a shelter with those kids felt that was really feeling full of meaning and full of love.
Well, I love that. And what you just highlighted with your story, I think many of us can relate to. I think most of us find ourselves pivoting at some point in our life and changing direction. And sometimes we think a linear path is what's best. But I think most people tend to end up zigzagging and pivoting and shifting course at one point or another, or many times throughout their adult lives. And part of it's just a life stage kind of an issue. You are getting established, you're now successful, have the ability to give back, and you felt that call towards more meaning and purpose in what you were doing. And for you, that meant getting off the corporate ladder, actually starting with, it sounds like, volunteering, and then feeling that meaning, then getting off the corporate ladder and starting a nonprofit and doing something that really brought meaning and purpose to you and your life. Like you said, you could see yourself doing it into the future. Whereas, perhaps your corporate career is something that served its purpose for a time, but now it seemed a little bit more hollow. Stuff, busyness, that can keep us occupied, but that rarely will give us, if ever, will truly give us meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in our lives. So all of us have to wrestle with that. I think there's no prescribed approach for people generally. You have to wrestle with that and figure out what makes sense for you and your situation, your context. Not everyone's going to quit their corporate job to go start a nonprofit. That's fine. But there's lots of opportunities for us to volunteer, for us to get involved in a political campaign, to get involved in a social enterprise or whatever, right? There's lots of ways that we can find meaning, fulfillment, and purpose in the work that we do, whether it's in our day job or if it's in a gig job or just our hobbies and things that we do outside of the workplace. So I think all of that's tremendous, and that you had the courage to follow that and follow that inner voice, I think is wonderful. So let's now get into your book a little bit more. Again, the title is Purpose, Passion, and Pajamas: How to Transform Your Life, Embrace the Human Connection, and Lead with Meaning. What do you see in terms of leadership? What will we see emerge as an inspirational leader's greatest asset as we move further into the future of work?
Well, I think because of the pandemic, we've all, I hope, and I see, have more compassion for each other. It was a horrific experience for so many people. And for those that escaped the worst of it, it was a very frightening experience and a frightening couple of years. Wearing a mask was very telling. We had to look in each other's eyes, which, can be uncomfortable, but it was the only way that we could figure out what we were saying. We couldn't even read lips. We had to listen carefully and see some emotion in each other's eyes to understand what we were saying. And in those worst times of the 2 years, we relied on that compassion in each other. And I think since we don't know what we've all been through and how we've changed, which we can read in the papers, the changes that are happening, both practically in workplaces, personally in homes, trying to readjust to working at home, working remotely, children, marriages, families, the seniors that we love. I think that we have opened our hearts a little more. And I think that's very important for leaders to really understand and to include in their skills, their list of skills. For so many years, and I know when I was an employee, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Looking back, I'd rather have been a team member. And in some cases I was, but in some cases I wasn't. I was an employee. I didn't really no one asked me for my opinion. They told me what to do. And if I did a good job, I was a really good employee, and that was what I would have called myself. And I don't know how many people would rather be a team player now and be counted and be part of roundtables, be part of solutions. So I think the inclusion of everybody, I think the asking everybody's opinion, not that you take everybody's opinion and you run with it, but everybody wants to be included and asked, and everyone wants to feel like there's something missing when they're not sitting there with the rest.
Yeah, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, really getting to a culture of inclusion, and now it's being extended to this idea of a culture and environment of belonging. I think that is exactly what you were just describing. So whether we're talking about traditional DEI stuff or we're just talking about how we relationally interact with each other in the workplace, really matters in how much meaning, purpose, and fulfillment people derive from the work that they do in their jobs. Relationships really matter. And so we need to make sure that everyone feels like they have the opportunity to bring their whole authentic self to the work that they do, that they can provide value, that they're needed, wanted, and have the ability to contribute in meaningful ways each and every day. And that's a team kind of an environment, right? That's not an employer-employee, subordinate to leader kind of relationship. It's a fundamentally different kind of a mindset. It's a different way of approaching how you lead people. And I think that's exactly what we need as we move into the future of work. Just to be successful as organizations, I think we need that. But particularly if we're going for purpose, passion, human connection, and leading with meaning, I think it's essential. I don't think you can get there without having that mindset shift and shifting the way we lead people.
Right. I agree. It used to be military style, years ago. You do what I say, I'm the boss. And we've come through this time, and I think we're headed this way anyway, where a lot of people have a choice. A lot of people are deciding, I have a choice. Maybe we didn't think about having a choice. We took a job. Nobody told me, find your purpose. You have a purpose. Everybody has a purpose. I wanted a job. I was told, get a job. And I'm sure that my first employers thought, we'll hire her. She'll be grateful. We're giving her a job. But not so much. People are saying, not that job. Maybe not. Let me go in. Let me talk. The potential employee is interviewing the employer. And I think that that's necessary. Everybody wants to feel, meaning in work now, not just at home. It's not you work and you hate your job for 8 or 10 hours, and then you go home and you're lucky if you get a couple hours of personal time that means something to you, and then you try to grab 2 days on the weekend, and then the majority of your week is drudgery. Nobody's settling for that anymore.
Yeah, they're not settling for it. And you highlighted their a distinct style difference, the authoritarian kind of command control, fear-based leadership approach that was so common in previous generations. And I mean, quite frankly, it's still common in many organizations and with many leaders. I think many leaders recognize they can't talk that way. Like they have to at least put on the air of empowerment and support and compassion and empathy in their leadership approach. But in terms of the lived experience and the day-to-day interactions and how they actually manage and lead, I think the vast majority of leaders still fall back into bad habits of command control, top-down hierarchy, fear-based, carrot and stick kinds of approaches to leadership. And that style just doesn't work nowadays. And some people will argue, well, it depends on the type of organization, it depends on the type of work. I've worked a lot of different types of jobs. I've worked in the fields. I've worked construction. I've worked in factories. I've worked blue collar, white collar. I've worked a whole bunch of different types of jobs for different organizations. My personal anecdotal experience is that in every single one of those experiences, it would have been far more meaningful to me, and it would have produced more engagement, productivity, and extra effort from me and those around me had my boss taken more of an empowering type of an approach where they sought out my opinions and ideas, where I had a voice and I had the opportunity to contribute and make things better. You know, even a factory job. I think of a factory job I had in my early 20s. Part of it maybe is just the way my mind works, but I can't help but just see process inefficiencies, and I just can't help but notice and try things to improve situations. And so I found myself in a job that was very mundane, very monotonous and repetitive. And, you know, the only way I kind of survived that, this is saving up money to go to college. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And then I just challenged myself. I made a game out of it. Like, how efficient can I be? How productive can I be? And do a little bit more and a little bit better every day. And you'd think they would be grateful for that. Like a job that previously would, you know, for me in the factory would take, you know, upwards of an hour to do this thing. I was able to trim that back to 20 to 30 minutes. You'd think that they would be grateful for that. But in fact, what happened was they told me to knock it off, because they were concerned about how that might impact other employees, and they're worried about disrupting things and blah, blah, blah. Right. And so I think in any environment, in any work kind of situation, we can make it more meaningful. I truly believe that. And a lot of it just starts with your boss, the leader in charge of the team, and how they view you, how they approach you, and how they value you. And unfortunately, we still see many making excuses for saying, well, you know, that might be great for a Google, but it's not something that applies to us. And I just disagree. I think it applies pretty much to any kind of workplace environment.
Yes, I think in addition to compassion, I think a leader more than ever needs to inspire now. And, you know, not demand respect or demand to be listened to. I think we all need inspiration. We've always all we'll do more when we're inspired by our leader. And I think that leader is responsible for the vision, responsible for communicating that vision, responsible for a relationship with as many employees as possible, certainly the team leaders, and then and requiring team managers and leaders to have relationships moving on across their teams and to communicate and to be as inspiring as they can, whether or not they're as inspiring as their leader. But I know personally, I would do much more for someone that inspired me than somebody who, you know, scared me into doing something. And it's unique, but you can develop a talent for inspiring. You know, it's living and speaking through your heart versus your head. And, you know, maybe aren't used to that or haven't been. I know many who are, but maybe one or two of my bosses in all these years really led from their heart and spoke from their heart and made decisions from their heart and their head. And I think that that's rare and uncomfortable for people, but I think we're all learning how to do it more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said heart and mind, right? So it's not like we have to move away. We're not talking about just making everything a heart-based, intuitive kind of an approach and decision making. We need data-driven, results-driven kind of strategy and decisions, but the two need to go hand in hand, heart and mind connected as we're interacting with people, and to just recognize that people have different styles, and that means we as leaders need to be a little bit transformative in how we approach the different people on our teams. Some people do need a little bit more of a direct approach. Other people really, they just want you to believe in them and support them and let them loose so they can do really cool things. Know your people, know how to support them best, know how to help them achieve their potential. That's really the key. And you've already mentioned it a couple of times, and I know you go into this in great depth in your book, but if we're looking for a workplace of purpose, passion, and meaning, which is something that more and more workers want and even demand in today's world of work, particularly younger millennial and Gen Z workers, they just expect it. So if we're trying to establish that within our organization, and perhaps within an organization where traditionally that hadn't been a focus of the culture or how they went about doing things, how can leaders and employees together work towards that end to create that shared culture of purpose and values so that they can find meaning and passion in the work that they do each and every day?
Right. You said it, John, know your people. I teach Purpose ACER program. I created it because when I speak on how Pajama program has embraced the human connection, has grown because of knowing each other, learning about each other, and caring. And of course, caring for our purpose and our mission and the children that we clothe in pajamas so they can sleep in something other than their raggedy, smelly clothes. So I teach through workshops and conversations how to know your people, how to include them in the communication, how to hear what they're thinking. What do they like? What don't they like? Where is there a middle if it's a very wide divide? And it's a process. First, the leader has to want this, because in the long run, it's going to be more successful for the company, more profitable. It'll feel really good. You'll be amazed at how different you feel when you have purpose as your North Star. It's amazing. I hear it all the time because most of us grew up without that North Star. Our parents didn't teach us. We didn't learn it in school. Like I said, we learned to get a good job that makes money, a good job that's secure. Not what were you meant to do? What could you see yourself doing and the money will come? No, we didn't hear that. And I don't know if I would have believed it back then, but it changes everything. Purpose changes everything. And it starts with being willing to have those hard conversations and being willing to make some changes in the way that you led or the way that your organization is designed. And it's really about listening and knowing your people, as well as what you want your company to stand for. And getting to the bottom line is so much easier when you have people rallying for you, when everyone understands what you're doing and why you're doing it and what their contribution is. People want to contribute to their income. They want to contribute to a company that they feel good about. But I think we all want to contribute also to the greater good. And if that's and since that is now a major reason we're looking at companies more closely, is because what are they doing for the greater good? And a lot of people looking for jobs now are considering that when they're deciding where they want to work. What are you doing for the greater good? What are we doing together for the greater good?
Yeah. And I think what you were just saying reminded me of this idea of creating a self-renewing capacity within your organization and within your team, especially over the last couple of years, as you have noted, it's been really challenging in terms of mental health, physical health, fatigue of people, just the wariness of people and the burnout that people have experienced as they've been dealing with the pandemic and adjusting the way they work and all of those things. It takes a toll. And so you want to tap into the purpose, the passions of your people. You want to have meaning, but we also have to be careful of burnout. And as we connect people to their passion and their meaning, it's one of the best ways I know to reinvigorate people, to build in that self-renewing capacity of your team so that people don't leave work being drained and then dreading going back to work the next day, but they leave feeling really great about what they accomplished that day. They go home, they spend time with friends, family, community, they re-energize, they get a good night's rest. They're not like sleeping horribly because they're stressed about everything that's going to happen the next day. But they wake up empowered and energized, ready to go and excited to get back to work and to work on really cool things to make a difference for the company and for the world. When we can create that kind of environment, it's self-renewing and you don't have to worry about burnout. And people are willing. It's the difference between compliance and commitment. It's the difference between engagement and quiet quitting. It's, the difference between people being truly energized and engaged in their work versus just going through the motions. And that's what I think we all want, what we all need in our workplace. And if we want our organizations to be successful, moving into the future of work with a hyper-competitive, increasingly interconnected global economy, where we're competing with companies from all over the world for employees, people working all over the world, in that kind of environment with rapidly changing nature of work, with technological disruption, all of that messiness, we need people to be self-renewed, self-fulfilled, and that's going to help us thrive. Well, Genevieve.
Perfectly said, John.
Yeah, Genevieve, this has been a really great conversation. I appreciate all of your insights and taking time with me and my audience today to talk a little bit about your work and your book. Before we wrap things up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with my audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, where they can find your book, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yes, they can find me at GenevievePituro.com. And my book is everywhere books are sold, Amazon and Barnes & Noble, wherever you like, mostly online. And, I think I'm very curious where we'll be. We all are 5 years or 1 year from now. And I think those leaders that embrace the human connection, embrace purpose, and find a way to marry them are going to be around and inspiring us for a very long time.
I think so too. Well said, Genevieve. It's been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Genevieve and her team can do for you. Check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.